two. Check, 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 check. 1, 2. Testing, testing. 1, 2. 1, 2. Checking, checking. 1, 2. Testing. 1, 2. Hey, hey, testing, testing. 1, 2. 1, 2. Testing. Hey, hey. Check, check. 1, 2. Check, check. 1, 2. 1, 2. Testing, testing. 1, 2. Good. Testing, testing. 1, 2. 1, 2. Testing, testing. 1, 2. Hey, hey. Check, check. Check, check. 1, 2. check, check, 1, 2. Hey, hey, check, 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 1, 2. 1, 2, check, 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 1, 2. Hey, hey, check, check, 1, 2. Check, 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 1, 2. 1, 1, 2, check, 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 1, 2.
Good morning. Please stand closer to me.
I know.
I feel very alone.
We left you.
Am I going to be able to hear myself, or should I just go? I will not hear myself. Okay.
Okay.
So can you give me a thumbs up when you're ready for me?
I'm going
Wait.
to count down from 3, give it 3 more, and then tighten it.
All right.
That's probably audio, bro. You good?
Bro, what'd you just do?
One sec.
Oh.
Go up to menu here. Punch menu.
You need to switch the audio to in here. It's on internal right now.
Yeah, here. Go function menu.
We good? Did you lose audio?
We lost power for a second. I don't know why I'm not getting the menu.
Watch out. It's on menu. Hold on, stop doing that. Why doesn't it like this? It's still on internal. I don't know what you did.
I don't know how to get back to the menu. Why is that not?
This is the menu.
It goes in a bigger menu.
Yeah.
They're working on it.
Just stand by.
What?
Stand by.
I don't know, bro.
That's
All right. All right. Nick, we give the speaker a little bit of volume behind us.
yeah.
Right. Ready to go? All right. Try now, Renee.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. The speaker's on behind us. One. Are we good?
I'm not getting the channel
You need
input
to
right
change
here.
that.
It's blacked out.
I was getting it on the live feed.
We're hearing the internal mic of this camera right now.
We've got the internal mic on the live feed. We're not getting it to the speaker.
Built-in mic.
That's what they're trying to figure out. We traced it earlier on the recording. The speaker does have power.
It's coming through this.
Shit.
Yeah. Bro. How did you do
It should break.
There we go.
I smell
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Renee Williams, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the National Center for Victims of Crime. And we're here because we are very concerned, and we're bringing a very clear message to California lawmakers. Stop protecting public institutions at the expense of abuse and raped children. Now, we do recognize the financial pressures that are facing school districts, counties, and public agencies in California. But these concerns deserve serious solutions, not at the expense of survivors who have waited for decades for justice. Rather, we have presented accountability measures that are common sense measures that the Speaker and the Senate should be considering. Child sexual abuse is uniquely devastating, and it carries a lifetime of emotional and financial damages. So we have a message for Speaker Rivas. Don't rush this fundamental change to survivors' rights because your legislative calendar is running out and you want to do this in secret. One of the greatest pleasures of my job is working with survivors who have lived through the consequences of this abuse, and some of them have joined me today. It's my great honor to introduce each of them. Jena-Lisa Jones is behind me. She famously challenged Jeffrey Epstein. Her long-running legal battle has led to change for countless survivors. Torie Gibson is a former school superintendent and child victims who understands not only what happens when victims' rights are undermined, but the need to act and prevent future abuse. And Cassandra, a survivor of Mark Burnt in the Miramont Elementary School scandal. She'll address the type of impact this abuse truly has on minority communities. And finally, one of the greatest victim advocates I know, Chris Hansen, who famously brought a spotlight to child sex abuse on the internet through To Catch a Predator, and who has earned 10 Emmy Awards and remains one of the most staunch victims advocates in the United States. Jena-Lisa, would you like to share your story?
Good afternoon, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. My name is Jena-Lisa Jones, but today I'm not here simply as a name on a page, a case number, or a statistic. I'm here as a survivor of childhood sexual assault. I am a survivor of Jeffrey Epstein's, and I was 14 years old when it happened. 14. I was a child. And I want you to remember that word, child, because sometimes when years pass, the child disappears from the story. The dates remain. The documents remain. The arguments about evidence remain. But the child, the human being who lived through it, can become lost somewhere in the paperwork. I am here today to make sure that does not happen. And there is another reason I am here. I am here because Jeffrey Epstein was able to abuse children and evade meaningful accountability for far too long, in part by secrecy, institutional failures, and a lack of transparency allowed his conduct to remain hidden from the public scrutiny. And that is what is happening here in California. When powerful people and institutions or systems fail to expose and stop abuse, the consequences do not simply disappear. The victim will live with those consequences. Children live with them. Families live with them. And survivors can spend decades carrying the damage while the people and systems that failed to protect them move forward. That is why I'm speaking today. I'm not here simply to revisit the past. I'm here because what happened to children should never be buried by time, secrecy, or institutional failure. I know what it is like to wait for justice. I know what it is like to carry something that happened to you as a child into adulthood. And I know what it is finally find the words to say something you could not say when it happened. For years, I carried what happened to me. And I want people to understand something about children and sexual abuse. A child does not experience abuse with the knowledge and understanding of an adult. A child may not have the words. A child may not understand that what is happening is abuse. A child may be afraid. A child may be ashamed. A child may believe they will be blamed for this. A child may believe no one will believe them. And sometimes the person abusing that child deliberately creates that exact confusion. That is what grooming and manipulation can do. It can distort a child's understanding of trust, boundaries, right and wrong, and even reality itself. So when someone asks a survivor, "Why didn't you tell someone?" I wish they would stop for a moment and ask a different question. How could the child possibly have known how to tell? When someone asks, why didn't you report it sooner? I wish they would understand that trauma does not operate on a calendar. Disclosure does not happen because a certain number of years has passed. There is no expiration date on truth. For me, coming forward years after the abuse was not the evidence that would happen was less serious. It was the evidence of how difficult it was to survive it. And surviving does not mean the harm ends when the abuse ends. The years continue, the memories continue, the consequences continue. There are things survivors can lose that no courtroom can ever give back. A sense of safety, the ability to trust, relationships, opportunities, a childhood. And sometimes years of a person's life spent trying to understand something that should have never happened to them in the first place. That is why the passage of time cannot be allowed to become another punishment. 20 years passing does not make abuse less traumatic. 30 years passing does not erase what happened. And the fact that a survivor needed 20 or 30 years to find the courage, safety, and understanding or support to speak cannot be turned into an argument that they deserve less justice. I'm not asking you to ignore the evidence. I'm not asking you to abandon the due process. I understand that older cases can present difficult questions. Evidence should be examined, claims should be investigated, facts should be tested, and if someone commits fraud, they should be held accountable. But let us be very careful about where that responsibility falls. Survivors should not be treated as a fraudulent simply because their stories are old. Fraud hurts legitimate survivors too. The answer to fraud is to investigate fraud. It is not to assume that every survivor that comes forward years later is lying. And when the evidence is old or difficult to obtain, those questions should be addressed honestly and fairly. But an old injury is not a smaller injury. An old crime does not become a less harmless crime. And an old victim does not become less worthy of being heard. So I'm asking you to remember the human being behind every case number. Remember the child. Remember the 10-year-old who did not have the words. Remember the 12-year-old who was afraid. Remember the 14-year-old who did not fully understand what was being done to her. Remember the 15-year-old who may have not understand that no one would understand. Remember the child who was trying to survive, not the adult you wish that child had been. And remember the adult finally reaches a point where she can stand up and say, this happened to me, I survived it, and I deserve to be heard. When the survivor finally walks into a courtroom, she should not discover that the law has already decided what their suffering is worth simply because she needed time to survive before she could speak. I'm not asking for a guarantee of an outcome. I'm asking for an opportunity to present the evidence, an opportunity for the facts to be tested, an opportunity for both sides to be heard, an opportunity for the jury to do its job. That is what justice requires. Not that every allegation be believed without question, but that every legitimate survivor be given the fair opportunity to be heard without being discredited simply because trauma made the journey disclosure a long one. Justice should not depend on whether a traumatized child was able to speak on someone else's timeline. I cannot go back. I cannot become the girl I was before the abuse. I cannot reclaim the years that were taken from me, and I cannot give that 14-year-old girl the childhood she should have had. But I can stand here today and speak for her, and I can tell you what she could not tell anyone then. It was not your fault. You were a child. You did not cause what happened to you, and you deserve to be protected. So today I ask you to remember something simple. When decades have passed, do not see only an old date. See the child, see the person, see the life, because behind every old claim is not simply an old story. And sometimes after years of silence, that human being finally finds the courage to say, I am still here, I survived, and I deserve justice.
My name is Cassandra, and I was a student at Miramonte Elementary School during the time that Mark Burnt was a teacher there. Bernd worked at Miramonte for more than 3 decades, starting from 1979 to 2011, and targeted young children, elementary students. What makes this case even more disturbing is that later it was revealed that years of red flags, complaints, and warnings were ignored or dismissed by the institution that swore to provide a safe learning environment for me, the student. I was one of the children affected by what happened at Miramonte. And my experience taught me that the consequence of abuse doesn't end when the abuse itself stops. It impacts the victims into their families, their friendships, and their lives for years after. Taking legal action against an institution as large and as powerful as a public school district is intimidating and overwhelming. My family and I, a typical Latino family from South Los Angeles, had to navigate a complicated legal process while already dealing with the emotional impact of what happened. Far too many victims of sexual abuse in schools come from all backgrounds, but especially in minority communities. They just look like me. They look like your neighbor, your friend, a relative. Laws which protect powerful public institutions from accountability at the expense of powerless abused children and their families is immoral. Finding the right legal counsel that we can trust and understand what we were facing against and stand up to such a powerful entity is not an easy task, and to this day continues to not be an easy task. My experience is not unique. Too many children who experience abuse in schools come from communities where families have limited resources to legal representation or less confidence that institutions will listen to them. When the law makes accessing the courts hard, it's those children and their families who are the most likely to be silenced. If victims like me had been denied access to the courts, much of what would have happened at Miramonte would never have came to light. Law should not protect powerful public institutions from accountability at the expense of the victims. Instead of limiting compensation and creating additional barriers, trying to prove what happened to them, the focus should be strengthening the prevention, transparency, and accountability of these institutions. Children should never need to fear for their safety. And when the adults and institutions responsible for protecting them fail, those children deserve a meaningful opportunity to be heard and seek justice.
Hello, thank you for being here today. My name is Torie Gibson. We're here with a clear message to California lawmakers. Do not protect public institutions from accountability at the expense of sexually abused children. I know this issue not only as a former educator and school superintendent of almost 30 years, but as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse by my teacher. It was 1986, and I was 10 years old. I was 47 when I first confronted what happened to me as a child. It was a rainy December evening, and I was sitting at my desk at work as a school district superintendent and a county school superintendent in the state of California, reviewing documents related to an AB 218 case I was tasked with investigating. The allegations of child abuse made by a survivor who had attended the school district I was leading and swore to defend. As I read through the details of that case, something happened. I will never forget that moment. The survivor's story forced me to confront memories I had buried for decades. I had not spoken about what happened to me since 1989. I went home that night and asked my husband, "Have I ever told you about this?" And I began very hesitantly to tell him very basic details about what I remembered as my 13-year-old self. He looked at me very confused. It was clear I had not. Because I had not spoken about the abuse, again, as I already said, since 1989. This is the reality for many survivors. Trauma does not operate on a legislative timeline. People do not always have a voice. The words, the safety, the support, the financial means, or even the ability to come forward when they are young, let alone if ever. For some survivors, it takes decades before they are able to say out loud what happened to them. It wasn't until my team actually had me sit down and write out every detail from my 10-year-old self that I truly understood the extent of my abuse. From another perspective that I bring, I also know what it means to be afraid of what speaking out could cost a survivor. I've spent decades building a perfect career with no blemishes. I am deeply proud of it. And since coming forward, I have faced harassment and threats. There have been moments when I questioned whether I should walk away, whether the professional costs I have worked so hard for 30 years, was simply just too great for me and my family. But I didn't. No child should have to carry that trauma into adulthood, and no survivor should have to choose between telling the truth in their story and protecting the life and career they worked so hard to build. Because no child should walk into a school, a place where they should be protected, cared for, and safe, with the adults their parents entrusted them to, and yet be sexually abused on a regular basis. As we all stand here today advocating for reform, students walked into schools today across California where hundreds, possibly thousands across our country are experiencing abuse by adults entrusted with their care as we stand here. Let that sink in. This is why raising the standard of proof for survivors who come forward at the age of 40 is absolutely fundamentally wrong. We should not allow the legislature to be rushed in the final hours of the 2026 session by claims that financial collapse is inevitable because of child sex abuse lawsuits. Financial collapse is not the problem. The lack of meaningful reform is the problem. We should not respond to concerns about public school finances by shifting the burden onto survivors or making it harder for them to seek justice. Remember, I was the system. I fully understand school finances, and I can clearly tell you that this is not our problem in school finance for California. However, there is a better plan, one that protects children, public agencies, and taxpayers while preserving due process and accountability. The reforms we are presenting today are practical, preventative measures designed to make schools safer, to ensure that when allegations arise, they are handled transparently and appropriately. These are not unreasonable demands. They are common sense. They are designed to prevent abuse, expose patterns of misconduct that happen every single day in our schools. They protect children and families and ensure that those entrusted with our children are absolutely held accountable. We can establish due process. We can ensure institutions are safe, and we can hold abusers accountable. We do not have to choose one at the expense of the other, which will be survivors. Survivors and the public deserve a transparent legislative process with meaningful survivor input, not a last-minute bill negotiated behind closed doors. The goal should not be to make it harder for survivors to seek justice. The goal should be to make sure fewer children need to seek it. California and the public education system across our country can and absolutely must do better. Thank you.
I'm Chris Hansen, and I'm going to need the lawmakers of the state of California to take a seat and carefully consider any legislation that might limit the remedies children who are preyed upon in schools have to seek justice. If you had asked me 22 years ago how long we'd be doing our predator investigations, I would have said, well, maybe we'll do 3 or 4, and who's going to show up after that? Well, here we are, 22 years later, Earlier this year, during a sting in Maryland, a man showed up to meet a 15-year-old boy. He had been Teacher of the Year in the Baltimore School District. His current position, when I came face to face with him, was the Chief of Advanced Classes and Gifted Learning. That's right, he spent his days with children. He now resides in the Q block of the Harford County, Maryland jail, facing serious criminal charges. A closer review of his digital media and computers suggests that he had been engaging in a pattern of grooming students and former students into inappropriate, intimate relations, going on for years. We've encountered a number of teachers and school employees in our stings over the years. Do you really think this is the first time they've offended? Do you really think they've never tried to do this with a student in their school system? I can predict without fear of contradiction, the answer is no. We know through 3 different administrations, through the Department of Justice, the Department of Education, that 10% of our students somehow face an inappropriate exploitation of a sexual nature while they're in school. 10%, think about that. Nationwide, that's above 50 million. In this state, it's 500,000 plus. I understand the fiscal responsibility of this legislative body. I understand the challenges here in the state of California and across the country. But the answer is not to limit the legal remedy. The answer is to prevent the problem from happening in the first place, to be vigilant, to make sure once a teacher is caught and has had their legal rights measured and their day in court, that they don't go back to teaching here or anywhere else. And so I want the lawmakers here to carefully consider any legislation that may have unintended consequences or intended consequences of protecting predators in the schools here. Thank you very much.
I want to take a moment to honor the incredible courage that it took for these 3 women to come forward. Like so many women, they come forward not because they're worried about money, but because they want to make sure this never happens to another child. As you heard Chris say, 3 different administrations have found that 1 in 10 children will be abused. And that happens because last-minute bills are pushed through in secret. So we're asking California lawmakers, take a break, slow down. Don't do this on your legislative calendar. Organizations like mine are always happy to work with you, and we're happy to come out and come up with common sense measures if you call us. I want to thank you all for joining us today, and I know that we are all open to questions if you have any. Please. Well, I think the first step to our support would be ensuring that victims and survivors are at the table at any negotiation that comes forward. With that being said, it's very difficult for us to say whether or not we would support anything because so little has been put out about this bill. It's like following a constantly moving target. So it's really, we're not against reform, but it's very difficult to say we would agree to something when nobody's giving us any information. I will tell you in the past, I have worked with California senators on some common sense bills. Just last year, we did work together. I can't speak to who Speaker Rivas is speaking to or not speaking to, but what I can say is that he has not called my company at all.
Thank you all.
Once again, thank you all for joining us today.